Welcome to Finding Brilliance in the Bees. I'm Clarissa, and this is an intimate video series. It's part of She Rocks at College Live, and it's all about the integration of academics in life and the beauty that emerges from the shame and failure as you step into your worth as a non-traditional college student. So this is my amazing husband, Elvis, and he is joining us tonight because we are going to have a real conversation around what it's like to go through college together, balancing work while in college, how and where we came from impacted our mindset and experience as college students, and of course our relationship. And I want to remind you that the sole purpose of this series is to create a safe place for you to grow and heal from all the programming around what it means to be smart, what it means to be a good student, and what it means to be brilliant and successful. This is really all about building the shame resilience, or our ability to bear witness to the things we're all thinking, feeling, and might be afraid to share for fear of not being worthy enough, smart enough, talented enough, so that we can learn how to move through it and grow with grace. And so just to give you a reminder, I'm following Brene Brown's 4 elements of shame resilience. And so those 4 elements are the ability to recognize shame, or when you're feeling ashamed, when you're feeling like your worth is being questioned. 2 is practicing critical awareness, which is the practice of knowing that something exists and knowing why it exists and how it affects us. 3 is reaching out and really finding your network, your support system where you can share your experiences without being judged. And then the last one is speaking shame, or learning to speak your pain, to describe to another person what you're feeling and why you're feeling it, so that you can learn from it or ask for what it is that you need support around in the moment. I recommend that you go and watch the very first episode of Finding Brilliance in the Bees, as it really lays the foundation for this series and how it's going to play out in the next 2 episodes. So I think that we should start off with probably telling people a little bit about our relationship. Right? So do you want to tell people how long we've been together?
So we've been together for 13 years, married for just over about a year.
That's right.
Yeah.
We met when I was 17, so I was a senior in high school, and you were a freshman in college at the time. Yeah. So I want to first start off with the question, what we thought our journey through college was going to be like, and what it really was like, and how it impacted us. So I know that you and I both have different experiences with college. I had like a very set path that I wanted to go on, and you have always been very easygoing. So if you want to go ahead and share your experience of what you thought college was going to be like and what your experience was.
So basically, college for me, I had absolutely no expectations. Well, I guess there were minimal expectations. I went through high school and I just applied for all the colleges that, I thought I had interest in. A lot of local schools, a lot of schools in nearby states, just because I had money on my mind. I didn't want to graduate college with a lot of student loans. I just applied for all of the colleges that I thought, would fit that particular mold. And what I did was I had no expectations. I just applied, and if I got in, I got in, and if I didn't, I didn't. And then whatever colleges I was accepted to, I was just going to go to those colleges and pick the best one, go to that particular college, and then just wing it, I guess.
Yeah, and you ended up going to a community college. You chose a community college first. And when we met, you were there. You were at the community college. And was that where you expected to end up?
No, I mean, I always knew that I wanted to go to a 4-year college and, get at least a bachelor's. My father always pushed for a college education. So I knew that going to a community college was just a stepping stone for me, and that eventually I would transfer to a 4-year college.
Yep. Did the fact that I knew exactly what I wanted to do. So many of you who watch me on YouTube, you know that like I was on the pre-med track. I was voted most likely to succeed. We were actually both salutatorians in our high school, right?
Yeah.
His high school was more rigorous than mine. I went definitely to like an inner city school where you didn't really have to do much to get that title, but I knew that I wanted to go to a 4-year college. I wanted the full college experience. I wanted to be able to live on campus and all of that. But both of us coming from Dominican households, for me being the girl in the family, my parents didn't want me to go away. They didn't want me to live on campus initially, and so that really narrowed the schools that I was able to go to, and I ended up going to Providence College, which is a primarily white college here in Rhode Island. It's a private college, a 4-year college, and I was on the pre-med track. And I always wanted to ask you if the fact that I like had that path ever like affected you or made you feel pressure to like need to like go to a 4-year college, because that, I mean, you met me when I was a senior, and like I was always very focused and serious.
I wouldn't say that it affected me directly. I think subconsciously maybe, because I was in I've always been the type of person that I follow my own path, and I kind of just do things as I feel, you know, as they come up, and I feel like it's the right time to do it. I kind of just do it and go with the flow. But the fact that I think subconsciously I kind of wanted to transition to a 4-year college sooner, because you got into a 4-year college and I was, I guess, in a community college, and I guess it wasn't seen as prestigious as a 4-year college.
Did you have that mindset though prior to meeting me? Like, did you think that you were going to a lesser school?
No. I don't think I wouldn't see it so much as a mindset. It was more of like a time thing. Mm-hmm. It was like, okay, she's in a 4-year college. She's advancing her career. I'm in this community college because I chose to come here because of the fact that I wanted to save some money, get my general education out the way, and then transfer. But I think for me, it was more of just like a time thing. I felt like because you were going to a 4-year college, and I kind of wanted to get into like the same, not mindset, but kind of like experience the same things that you were while you were going into a 4-year college, and while you were going through that experience. I almost felt like me staying at a community college was gonna hinder me in terms of like the experiences in college.
Did you think that I thought less of you because you were going to a community college?
No.
Okay. You were doing it trying to impress me. Okay. No. So both of us, we went to high schools in inner city. So I mean, you grew up in, I call it the hood of Rhode Island. I grew up in the hood. The education system isn't the best unless you go to a private school, or you there's like one school that's known to being the smart school here, which is Classical High School. Although I don't know if it still has that kind of a reputation.
There have been other schools that have advanced and are kind of on par with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But your school was one of them at the time because it was a charter school. So do you feel like you were prepared for college when you went, in terms of study skills and all that?
I felt like I was in terms of study skills. My high school focused a lot on reading, writing, math, and reading comprehension, and all of those skills that you're gonna, that are important for succeeding in college. As far as study skills go, I wouldn't be able to answer that question because I feel like for me, it has always been easy to just pay attention in class and get good grades. So I don't know if it was the school that prepared me for college, or if it was just that was just my my natural way of learning.
So were you an A student in college?
In college, I was not. So all throughout high school, I was in the honor roll, and then when I got to college, it was at a point in my life where I was taking so many things in. I was getting to know you. I was working full time. My parents started having problems with their relationship, so I was dealing with all of that, and it was almost like getting an A wasn't the number one most important thing for me at the time. So I just balanced, quote unquote balanced things as they came.
Did it bother you that you weren't an A student? Because I mean,
no,
not at all. You didn't care.
No, because I mean, like, I knew my potential, and I knew that if I wanted to be an A student, I could be. But there was just so much going on in my life that I didn't feel like if I would have dedicated all that time to school, then some other aspects of my life would have suffered. And I didn't want to compromise anything, so I balanced. Well, I guess I compromised everything a little bit. But no, it never bothered me. And I think it's funny, I'd gotten into a car accident at the time, right when I had just entered into college, and the lawyer that was on my case, we were having a conversation about colleges and schools and stuff, and he was saying, you really don't need to go to school and go to college and focus all your time on studying. The advice that he kind of gave me was go into it, do well enough to pass, and just take it all as an experience, because it's the only time that you're going to have an experience like that. So I guess that's kind of what I was doing and what I did. So yeah, it really never bothered me to not have, all A's and B's in college.
Would you say that I had the same mindset as you, or
no? No,
what
definitely
was your perception of me in regards to like my relationship with like my education and how it was progressing through college, and in the transition from like being known as like the smart girl in high school and like classy and like all that kind of stuff, to like going into this new environment where every day I was going in just feeling like I wasn't smart enough, like I wasn't good enough, like I was failing in all aspects of my life.
It was a struggle. I mean, I met you when you were in high school, and in high school you got the grades that you wanted. And I think we discussed at times that you felt like you weren't challenged because of the classes that you were in. So when you finally got to college, it was almost like a complete different beast, because there were different expectations and you were being held at a different standard. And it didn't come as easy for you. So it was a struggle. Whenever you got an exam back and you didn't get the grade that you wanted, it was like the end of the world, because you had not experienced failure prior to that time. So this was like a new concept for you, and now all of a sudden you start questioning your worth, and are you smart enough? And so yeah, it was definitely a struggle.
Yeah. Do you think that it affected our relationship at all? The fact that I was dealing with all that. And then also, so, he had expressed that like he was dealing with like family issues. So was I, especially during junior year of college. That was when my mom had come out that she was gay. And so like we were trying to like navigate how like the dynamic of our family was going to change and all of that. And was I living with you at that time?
So like the first few years of college, no. It was
after, right?
It was after, yeah.
Yeah, but how do you think that my experience of failure in college affected our relationship? Because you said that it impacted my worth, and did that translate into how I was in our relationship?
I think little by little, I saw like the confidence that you had when I first met you. Little by little, I saw that kind of start to dissipate, and then it got to a point where like I constantly had to keep reminding you, that just because you didn't do so well on this exam or this paper, that does not mean that you're not smart or you're not capable. It just means maybe you don't have the skills necessary to achieve the level of work that they're looking for. And it was just it was just me constantly reminding you and having conversations with you about your this has nothing to do with who you are as a person and your value and your worth. So in the beginning, I guess that's how it affected our relationship. It was more about, I constantly had to not so much guide you, but
right. I mean, and that's exhausting. Like to have, I mean, to me, I think it's emotionally exhausting to have to like constantly remind someone of like their worth when like you can see it but I couldn't see it. And so like for you to have to constantly reinforce to me that I was smart enough and worthy enough and like I was supposed to be there, and if this wasn't the route to go to medical school, that there were other options, because you were the one that encouraged me to apply to the community college for nursing when I didn't get into Rick's program. And so that was the first time. So when I went to nursing school, it was the first time that we had experienced not being in college at the same time, because you were working full time.
Yeah.
I was also working full time, but that was split between 2 jobs. And I decided to go to nursing school full time shortly after us moving out together for the first time.
Yeah, and that was the first time we experienced, you being in college and us living together.
Correct. Yeah. And that went not well at first, right?
Yeah.
So we had all the financial trouble. Like, I mean, we were not smart with like getting into like credit card debt. And I remember making a promise to you that like I was going to use the income that I was earning from my corporate job at the time before I started the nursing program to like help both of us get out of our credit card debt. And I kind of went back on that promise because in my mind, I'm like, nursing school is more important. Like once I finish nursing school, we're going to have like great income and everything's going to be amazing. And that kind of broke your trust with me. And so I feel like that kind of carried all throughout nursing school.
Yeah. Like
you were kind of resentful of that. And I also had all these beliefs around like who I needed to be in order for us to get married, because when we moved out, our friends had recently gotten married, and then I all of a sudden was like, we need to get married. We need to get married because we've been together longer than they have. That's the next step. Like I'm already done with like my bachelor's degree. Like that's what you do. We're living together now. Like we need to get married. And that also put a lot of pressure on you, and you weren't ready yet which caused a lot of strain on our relationship. We were experiencing financial strain in our relationship from me putting pressure on him to get married while I was going through the nursing program, and him not feeling like we were in a position, which at the time I didn't think he was right, but in hindsight, like we weren't in a position to go down that path, just in our relationship, not even like the financial part of it, but like I think that we had a lot of things that we needed to work out as a couple. One of those being because I feel like there was a lack of trust there from like my promise, and then I was having a hard time juggling working 2 jobs, being a nursing student. I also decided that I wanted to start a business around that time. And that's what a lot of our arguments were about, was just all of that.
Me always saying that I felt like you were taking on more than you can handle. And you were juggling so much, and then our relationship was kind of, being affected by all of that.
Yep. And I didn't really know how to handle it. In my mind, all I kept thinking of, like, I want to get married. And, like, I just remember from growing up that that's what you do. Like, you're raised in the Dominican culture to, like, be a housewife and to cater to the man and to make sure that his needs and all of that are taken care of. And when we moved in together, I sort of took on that role, like a mother kind of role. It wasn't even like a wife kind of role. It was like I wanted to be this perfect version of a woman so that you would want to marry me. And anytime I did anything that went against that, where you would point out, like, maybe I didn't cook or I didn't clean after myself or whatever, it was like a huge argument because I was trying to hold on to any hope that we could get married at the time. while you weren't seeing it that way at all.
For me, it was just, I'm trying to cook on this counter and the counter's dirty, and then I would just communicate to you, hey, when you're done cooking something, can you please wipe down the counters?
And it's interesting because like I felt like he wasn't understanding what the pressures of what it was like to work 2 jobs and go to school full time, but you had done it, right? But now it was in this different environment where we're living together, we're trying to like figure out, you know, what this means for our relationship. Nursing school is a super rigorous program. It was just a lot, and we did not have the communication skills to work through that. And there was a lot of screaming fights and a lot of not nice things said to each other, right? It was hard. And it's hard to like, you know, get into an argument with someone who you care about, and then the next day you have an exam, and to like, I think I experienced like my very first panic attack in that apartment. I think so.
Yeah.
Because I remember making a YouTube video about it, which is up here somewhere. I'll find the link to it and put it in the description. Because I had gotten I think I got a C on one of my nursing school exams, like around that same time period, and like made a video about it or something. You probably had no idea. But yeah, so what else? So do you have anything else to say about how it affected our relationship, me being in college and balancing all that?
No, I think definitely the communication piece was the biggest struggle that we had. Because a lot of the times there were also expectations, like you expected me to just help you with, you know, the housework, or, you know, if you didn't wash the dishes, maybe like just step up and wash the dishes for you. But I didn't, like the only time I knew you were struggling was when you communicated your struggles. But I didn't know that it was, I guess I didn't put 2 and 2 together that, you know, the struggles at school were affecting you at home. So when you didn't, let's say you use the dish and you didn't wash it, you know, I would express to you, hey, can you please wash the dishes when and I guess I just expected more communication on your end to let me know, hey, listen, I'm really struggling right now. I'm in the middle of it, studying for an exam. You know, I'm really stressed out. I need you to help me out. Can you maybe wash the dishes for me, or can you clean this for me? Can you clean that for me? And for me, being on the other end of it, it's almost like because there was a lack of communication, because you didn't communicate it to me, it almost felt like, you know, I was expected to just do all of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I felt. Like in my mind, I was thinking like, okay, I'm working 2 jobs. I'm also in nursing school full time. I'm trying to balance our relationship. I'm trying to do this whole like business thing, and you just have 1 job. Why can't you just help me out? And I had all these rules about who I needed you to be my support system while I was in school, but I never communicated any of that to you. And then I would get mad that you wouldn't behave in the way that I wanted you to behave, but you didn't know that I wanted you to behave in that way because I never communicated to you. Right. Did you feel like I had it all handled? Like, did you feel like I like was okay and like I had it under control, or no?
No, and there were times when you said, hey, I'm really struggling. But in my head, I always, because of my personality, and like I said earlier, I take on things as they come, and I felt like you were taking on more than you can handle, and it's almost, I felt like it wasn't fair to me that I have to deal with all these things that you're taking on.
Yep.
When you can't handle all these things, and they're clearly affecting our relationship and, you know, us living together. So yeah, it was for me, it was always a thing about like principle, and I've always been, you know, earlier in the relationship, like I would always think it's 50-50. You know, if I dirty a dish, then I'm washing that dish, and if you dirty a dish, then you're washing that dish. And it wasn't until we like worked through things that I realized that it's not 50-50, it's 100-100. So so with that mentality, it was almost like, for me, I felt like I was being disrespected because there was no communication. You know, you didn't ask me, can you please do this for me? It was almost like, here you go, you're expected to do it. And I felt disrespected at that time because of that mindset.
And I felt like you didn't care about me. Like, that's how I was feeling. I was like, I'm struggling over here. Like, I'm doing well in school, but I'm tired and I'm exhausted. And I mean, we are adults, so I mean, it affects your sex life, because like, I'm like, I don't want to be romantic. I don't want to do all these things. All I want to do is sleep. Like, I'm tired. I'm working all of the time. And of course, that when you're in like an intimate relationship, not having that connection also kind of puts stress on the relationship, and it affects things in that sense, because I just didn't have the energy for it. Like, I just couldn't. But I was really upset at you during that time period, because I'm like, why aren't you helping me? Like, you keep all you keep saying is, you're taking on more. Like, if you see me taking on more, why aren't you helping me? That's what was going on in my mind. And you were like, well, you're doing it to yourself. Like, the solution was for me to cut back, right? Or for me to ask for the help. But my whole life, I've just handled things. Like, whenever there's a problem, I just deal with it. I just keep moving through, because you can't stop. Like, you're the only person that's going to be able to achieve things. And in, the household that I grew up in, I'm learning now through therapy, like, a lot of that affected me in terms of like the things that I take on, and how I sort of conform myself to other people in order to manage their emotions. And so I wanted to make sure that you were okay. And in that, what I was doing was causing friction in our relationship. Right. So I was just like holding everything in and holding it in, and like putting on this front that like I was okay, everything was all together. And then you would have experienced moments of me just exploding. And you're like, where is all of this coming
And it
from?
wasn't like I wasn't willing to help you, because every time you approached me and said, can you help me with this, I don't think there was ever one time where I said, no, I'm not doing that.
But it was my own ego or whatever it was that I was experiencing at the time. But it was rough. I think that was like the worst like stretch of our relationship, and we like learned a lot about each other and all of that stuff. And this is the kind of stuff that like I don't think colleges take into consideration. And a lot of my students who follow me out here on this channel, or who have reached out through email, like they express, it's like, how do you continue to do well or continue to put school as a priority when your whole life is falling apart?
Right.
And I think that you've always had a very balanced view of everything, where you're like, well, of course you're gonna, some things are going to be put on the back burner, or you're going to adjust things. And like, you've always been really like level-headed in that sense. And I'm like, no, like everything needs to be held up, and it needs to be held up perfectly. And even if there's like fire underneath, we're going to pretend like it's all okay. And I feel like that's what a lot of students are beating themselves up over, is that like, even when you were talking about the fact that you weren't affected by the fact that you weren't an A student in college, you were a BC student, and you were okay with that because you had other priorities in your life. But to me, like, that meant that I couldn't handle things. And like, I would associate the fact that I couldn't get A's and also have like this perfect relationship where we didn't argue at all, and where you wanted to marry me, and we had like the best sex life, like all this stuff was happening when I was in college. Like, the fact that I couldn't keep it all together, to me, it meant that I wasn't worthy as a student, that I wasn't worthy as your girlfriend, that I wasn't, worthy of anything. Like, the perfectionism was basically like eating me alive. And like, I didn't know how to handle it and how to deal with it. But you don't take that on. And is that something that you learned through like growing up, or like, were you taught, or is it something that you were born with? Because I'm always curious.
I don't take what on?
Like, I don't know, like, you don't associate what's happening around you with your worth.
I don't know. I guess it's just my personality. I've always been the type, like I said earlier, I just follow my own path, and people around me are like shouting in my ear and trying to get me to go this way, and I just do me. I don't know. I guess I can attribute it to my personality. And I don't know. I guess if I think back to it, I grew up in a very strict household where my father was always telling me what to do. Everything had to be done a certain way. You know, there were high expectations, and you kind of had to follow all the rules and produce. And I guess when I went to college, because of the issues that my parents were having, my father wasn't in the picture as much, so I kind of you know, got some autonomy at that point, and I started, you know, finding myself and realizing who I am. And I guess when my father was in the picture, I was always expected to do something a certain way, and there was so much pressure to do it. And then once he stepped out, it was almost like I didn't want that anymore, and I didn't let people control who I was going to be or going to become. So that's why, you know, not having A's was not really that important to me, because I really didn't care what anyone thought, as long as I graduated college and I was able to obtain a job with my degree.
Is that how you approached our relationship?
What do you mean?
I feel like you did.
What?
I don't know, like I felt a lot of pressure with like what everyone else is doing in their relationship, and you were kind of just like, we're not there, like we're
yeah, it was because I try not to compare myself, and this is something I've always done. I just feel like it's my personality. I don't compare myself with the person next to me. And like obviously you kind of see people have things, and you're like, oh, I want that too. But I don't beat myself up because I don't have that, and I don't set a time frame, you know, for me to get something that's based on someone else's time frame, because it's I see it as, you know, two different people having two different lives and different situations.
Why don't you feel bad?
Why don't I? Because it's to me, I feel like it's pointless. Because if you're comparing yourself to, you know, your friend or whatever, you had different upbringings, you went to different schools, you had different experiences and different situations in your lives. So why should I try to mirror them when it's a completely different situation? So I don't feel bad, because it's my life, and I'm living my life on my time frame, not what someone else is dictating.
See why I married him? It's not. So people probably want to learn or want to know how we ended up working through a lot of our communication issues that we had in our relationship when I was trying to balance all of that. What would you say is like the biggest, like if you had to like walk us through steps or just talk about like how we navigated that part of our relationship, what would you say?
What would I say is the most important thing?
Most important thing, or like what did we do to kind of get through that period in one piece where we actually stayed together and were able to work through. Our relationship isn't perfect by any means. I don't think anyone's is, but I feel like we definitely do a better job now of dealing with difficult times and busy periods, and, you know, really putting our relationship first without sacrificing our goals and achievements and things like that.
I mean, I think, and this sounds cliche, but communication is the most important piece. And I think for us, it wasn't until we learned how to communicate with each other and listen to each other and empathize with how the other person is feeling that we actually, you know, started working through some of our issues. Yeah, I mean, you don't really know what's going on in the other person's head unless they communicate it to you. And if there's, if there's a lapse in communication, then how are you gonna be able to address those issues? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we started doing, research on how to better communicate with the other person, how to communicate your feelings, and also how to empathize with that other person, and try to put yourself in their shoes, and make them feel like you actually care about what they're feeling, and you actually understand like what they're going through.
Yeah, we had to do a lot of work of like kind of deconstructing our families, and like, because I mean, you grew up with your dad being a certain way and your mom being a certain way, and they both had different roles. And in my family, the roles were like swapped, and I came in very like domineering and like, I got this, like, women are gonna rule the world kind of, I'm good, like, don't need you kind of vibe. And you came from, your mom is very like soft and like gentle, like as a woman. And so I feel like that affected our relationship a lot too. And like you understanding like the gender roles that were being played in my household, and like how I grew up and like saw the role of women and men, and the way you grew up, and like in your house it was equal, it seemed, right? Or
yeah, it was the typical 1940s 1950s, the patriarch of the family runs the family. The mother stays at home and cooks, cleans, and takes care of the kids. So I wouldn't say it was equal. It was just the old traditional, family style of relationship.
And I came from the complete opposite. My mom was definitely like, as they say, wore the pants in the family. I feel like my dad was definitely more nurturing, and so I was expecting you to be the same way as my dad. And I guess like I took on the role of my mother, and when like you pushed back, I was like, what is going on here? This is not the way a relationship works. And so we had to do a lot of work around that, and we ended up getting that book, Getting the Love You Want, and learning like the Imago relationships, and like the Imago technique, which is really good for a really good book for couples. And so that's where we started to learn how to really communicate and listen to each other and that kind of stuff. But I would agree with you, like communication was the biggest thing, because all of our arguments came from expectations that we didn't communicate to each other. And then after all the screaming and like after everything settled down, we finally like we would sit down and be like, oh, like I didn't mean that, or that's not what I thought at all. This is what I was expecting you to do, and when you didn't do it, this is how I felt.
Right.
But we didn't know how to become aware of that at the beginning at first. Like it was like we were just like cats and dogs. It's true, right? I mean, I feel like people hide this kind of stuff in a relationship, and this is what everybody goes through. And it's harder when you have other things going on, when like you don't live, like I keep saying, like in a vacuum. Like life happens while everything else is happening. It's not like you get plucked out of society and all you're doing is school, or you get plucked out of work and school and into a relationship. Like it's all happening at the same time. And the hardest part of being a non-traditional student like you were, where you're working full time while you're going to college, is learning, what is your role as a student? What is your role as a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a wife or a mom? What is your role as a worker, where, whatever title it is that you have? And how does all of that kind of jive together? And I feel like it all influences how we show up as students. Academics and your life are integrated, and the more you start to realize that, the more you start to become aware of that, the more you will start to change the way that you interact with your own life, with your relationships, with your academics, with goals that you want to achieve in your life. And you start to then recreate the college experience that fits your lifestyle and fits what is a priority for you, which I think you learned how to do very naturally. And it wasn't until I experienced all of those failures and difficulties that I was like, WTF, like why does everyone make it seem like life has to be a certain way? But really, it's about finding out where you're at and what is success for you in that moment. What is achievement for you in that moment? What is being smart enough for you in that moment? Because like you so beautifully said, why would you compare yourself to other people who have different life experiences and different circumstances that you're not in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And is there anything else you want to say? This was not scripted, so it just kind of went where it went.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully it was helpful.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
This is Elvis, guys. It's my husband.
Nice to meet everyone.
Thanks for watching. Bye.